Thank you very much. This is James Kemper with WH Meaner and Associates, together with Jeff Wolfberg of CEO Focus. We want to welcome you to our webinar for this month on hiring, firing, and getting it right. I want to thank you for taking time to spend us with this afternoon, and it does promise to be a very informative and good time. And we have Jeff Wolfberg, and Jeff is a president of CEO Focus of the Carolinas, which is a business advisory company for closely held and family-owned businesses. And Jeff works closely with business owners and leaders to help them to build value and take their businesses to the next level. Jeff provides coaching and consulting in a manner that allows his clients to learn as they work together so that when there is a next time for them, they'll be able to go it alone. His workshops and seminars on best practices, building business value, and growing revenue are well attended and highly regarded for their content and motivational value. Jeff, after growing up in a family business, led companies from startup to as many as 2,000 employees and 400 million revenue. He launched 2 startup companies and built them into industry leaders. He has successfully turned around and transformed several companies, improving their business models, organizations, sales, and marketing functions and processes. Jeff has a BSBA from Miami University, Ohio, and an MBA from the University of New Hampshire. Jeff has served on several boards of directors and advisors. As a result of his experience and expertise, he also guest lectures at universities and trade groups. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Jeff Wolfberg. Jeff, it's all yours.
Thank you, James. I sound really good in that. Gee, I better live up to the standard you just set for me. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's just get started here. So I'll start with talking about what we want to do here. Okay. What I want to do is share some of my experience and some examples from my clients and some of the peer advisory boards I run and the members, some of their experience as well. Essentially, I want you to leave this session today with a couple of good ideas. I want you to think about the strategic issues of hiring, not the tactical issues of hiring, and relax a little bit, because I think by the time we're done you'll understand that your problems with hiring and firing are the same as every other business. We all have similar issues. At the end, what I'm really suggesting is that we all go through the School of Hard Knocks, and I'm suggesting you go through mine. Attend my School of Hard Knocks rather than going through it yourself when it comes to hiring and firing in our discussion today. It was a great introduction. Really enjoyed the background which you said to say, but so there's very little I can really add to about myself. But CEO Focus is a peer advisory board company. We bring business owners together to serve as each other's board of advisors, and I work with all these business owners individually. I grew up in a family business. I've done, before I got out of school, my family sold the business, and I had to go it alone, and ended up launching my own startup. Somebody handed me this clear piece of plastic and said they were using it in France, and why didn't I try it here in America? And I did, and I found someone to make it, found some people to distribute it and apply it in the marketplace, and I grew a business that you probably all have seen. It's those clear plastic strips that you find hanging over dock doors and in warehouses and places like that. So I built a nice business only to find out that everybody who could make clear plastic became my competitor, and so I quickly had to sell it out to my supplier, who was the manufacturer of it, and found myself in the corporate world, and they immediately put me to work helping to turn around a number of businesses, and that's basically how my background worked, through a lot of different turnarounds, several middle market manufacturing companies, and commercial entities. So that's me. I've done a lot. Unfortunately, when you do turnaround work, you hire and you fire a lot, so I probably have much more experience than anybody ever wants to have firing, and I've done a lot of really good hiring too. So those experiences we can bring forward today. I want to cover some of the most common errors, and this is basically our agenda. Feel free to ask questions when you have them. I think you can raise your hands, and James can stop me, and we can deal with a question. Because on my screen I can't see the hands going up. But please don't be concerned if I suggest we wait until the end. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end too, or maybe something I may be able to catch later. But so here's our agenda, but I have a question for everybody. Who here today is afraid to fire people? I mean, I ask you to speak up. It's pretty hard to do that right now. I'm not talking about being afraid to fire people because they're going to get angry or they'd be upset, or maybe you're afraid of being sued. But I'll bet almost everybody here is really afraid of firing people. And here's the reality of it. You fire somebody, it's usually for a good reason, but you still have to find the replacement for them. And you have to interview candidates. You know, you have to find candidates, interview candidates, check references, hire them, train them, absorb the cost of training and lower productivity while you train them. And of course, who gets to do that? You do. So everybody's very hesitant to go about firing somebody, and I can't blame you. I can't blame you at all. It's a lot of work. And so what I want to talk about today is how to make that not so you can fire people because you want to, but so you can fire people because you need to and get their replacements in place. But excuse me, here's what happens when you avoid firing someone.
Jeff, one second.
We all avoid turnover. Yes.
With your question, I just sent out a quick poll, and about 67% responded on the "Do you have issues with firing?" that no, but it's not my favorite thing, and the other 33% were just a flat no. So,
well, it's nobody's favorite thing. It's absolutely nobody's favorite thing, but the problem is we all hesitate to do it because we don't like it. But what happens is that we tend to allow bad people to hang on to the organization longer than we should. And so that's the reason that I raised the issue. So, and by the way, having run a number of companies myself, I can tell you that when I have fired somebody, generally the response from the employees around them is, "What took you so long?" Because the people around the bad employees, they know long before the boss. And the problem that there is when you keep a bad employee around too long, they cause the good ones to quit. The good people leave. And so I really want to emphasize the fact that we say you should be fast to fire and slow to hire. I think the reality is that none of us move as fast as we should. And I have just an example from the other day where I was with a client, and we found out that in fact one of his people was quitting and taking another job. And when we dug in and got into the real issues, is there was a problem with his supervisor. That a recently hired, the guy hadn't even been with us 90 days, supervisor was not up to snuff, and he wasn't a good employee, and apparently he was a bit of a poisonous employee. And we were losing very good people because of somebody we should have gotten rid of, and we should have known to get rid of them. So that's why I want to talk about, why I talk about firing people, is that when you keep a bad employee around, your problems come in, they multiply. You end up having good people leave. And so if you have a large work team and there's a problem employee there, you can have 5 or 10 people quit on you. And that's where the real problem is. It's not being afraid to fire them as much as that you need to move quickly, you need to stay in tune with them, and you don't want to be losing good people. I have a few good examples here. Probably the best one is the most recent one I had with the supervisor. Probably another one is I have a client that makes rubber and plastics products, and a machine operator that was one of these guys that griped a lot. And he just made for a bad environment, and people around him were quitting all the time. And so we kept replacing the people that were quitting and never got to the root cause. And so if you're having turnover, it's often caused by by a poisonous person in the environment, and you've got to go ahead and address that, because it leaves a very, very bad impression with the other workers around them, and they know it. So, we're here to talk about hiring, but one of the reasons you hire is because people quit. So I want to start by getting at the reasons people quit. And this is one of the big ones. Most people don't quit for money. Most people quit for a bad work environment, or they're unhappy in their work. But when you're going to fire somebody, be careful. Poisonous people are litigious. If somebody's in, and I see this a lot, everybody's careful because they say I have a 90-day probationary period. One of the realities is that the probationary, by law, you can fire anybody for any reason within a year without having to explain anything or have much documentation. If they're longer terms than that, you want to review that information with an attorney. Better to spend a couple $100 ahead of a person that you're releasing and paying an attorney to review documents than pay later when you find out that maybe you didn't have good cause and you might have another problem. And if you are going to fire somebody, use a release, pay them a little additional severance, but get a release. And this helps cover you in a lot of ways. One is they're not going to sue you, they're not going to be a problem. It also assures that they're returning company property and reinforces their non-competes and calls for non-disparagement. It's just one of the realities of employee turnover is it's often caused by just the wrong person in your organization. And like I said, often we're the ones that are too late to find that out. So we're talking about hiring. And I can tell you right now, as I mentioned, it's hard work to hire. If you're going to do the process of finding the employees, and you're going to do the process of training the employees, and you're going to observe the costs of their productivity being low, this is hard work and it's very expensive. It's costly no matter what we do. One of our tendencies is to focus on the money that's out, the checks we write, instead of the true cost to the business. Often an open position is much more costly than the time and the cost to fill it. You have to kind of consider your opportunity costs. So I learned a lot while restructuring companies, that I could have a sales territory open for 2 months and not lose any business. But in month 3, we started to lose customers. And if your territory is large enough and you lose one customer, that could cost you maybe a couple $100,000 of revenue a year. So I very quickly found a way to put a process in place to replace salespeople and fill those vacancies inside of 2 months. It was well worth it to me to spend $30,000-$40,000 to make sure that I didn't leave that position open for longer than 60 days. I have a client manufactures auto parts, and anybody who's been in the auto parts business knows that General Motors and the big car manufacturers put pretty serious demands on you to lower costs. And so he came into the year with a plan to reduce his costs in one department by $400,000, and he had already, as happens, given that away in price. So he lost his manufacturing engineer in January, and his opportunity cost was $40,000 a month by not getting the cost reductions in place. And when I was talking with him, he asked him what he was going to do about filling the position, and he says, well, I put an ad on the internet, I'm starting to look at resumes and interview. It would have taken him 90 days or more to fill that position. Instead, we hired a guy like James at WH Meaner, and we found a first-class manufacturing engineer inside of 45 days. And so his opportunity cost, $60,000 in lost cost savings, and he kept it from being $120,000 in lost cost savings by filling the position quickly. And we see this all the time. When you go to do it yourself, and you see it here on this chart, it takes you forever. So you have this chart in front of you, the cost on the vertical axis, speed on the horizontal axis. Doing it yourself is very slow. It takes a lot of time. you're digging through the internet for resumes, you run an ad, you wait for a response, however you go about doing it. And often for a busy person, doing it yourself becomes and do it never, because you just never get the job done. You just don't have the time. And the alternative is to have somebody do it for you in the upper right quadrant. It's much faster. There's no question it's much faster. And it's a lot more money. No argument. It's more expensive. So what you have to do is weigh every position about not just the cost of filling it, but the opportunity cost of not having it filled. And more often than not, when you really sit down to do the math, you find you need to fill it pretty fast or it gets pretty expensive. Some industries move slow. Some situations allow you to leave a gap in your organization for an extended period. Other situations are, no, I need to have these people fast, and so you want to use the faster method of finding, sourcing, recruiting, and getting people on board. So this chart kind of illustrates it quite well. I also wanted to mention that there are alternatives in that you can do it with, you can hire somebody to do it with you, which is a little less costly. And to that end, for example, you may have internal candidates, but you do not have time or wherewithal to figure out who's going to be the best for that position, so you can hire somebody like a recruiter to help you with that process. It's definitely less expensive, and it's quite a bit faster. And there are a lot of variations on the do it with method of bringing people into your organization. So I'm not saying you have a choice, do it yourself or do a recruiter, but you need to find a way to do it faster, so you don't miss the opportunity cost that leaving the position open costs you. So question, do you guys hire your competitors' rejects? Most people do. I don't think they think about it. I can tell you I did several times, and I learned from this is my school of hard knocks. But let's face it, if you had a really good employee and he came to you and said, I'm going to go to the company across town because they're offering me 10 to 15% more, are you going to work with that guy to say, look, let me find a way to keep you, let me give you a little bit more money, let me do some things that persuade you to stay with me? Or are you going to turn to the person and say, well, good luck, nice to see you, or nice knowing you, bye? So if you don't think your competitors do the same thing, and you may go and hire somebody away from your competitor, and they don't fight to keep them, that kind of concerns me. And they may be sitting there, drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes and saying, "Hey, look at that! We're gonna send this bad employee over to our competitor. This is great. I hope he ruins their business like he ruins mine." You get that. The reality is the experience of working at your competitors is not necessarily an indicator that you've got a good employee. In fact, if your competitor is willing to give him up that easy, he may not be a good employee. What I really want to say is if you're going to hire people, you need to focus on ability and skills. They're much more important than experience. Experience, in fact, is the problem, or it can be a problem. You can take a person who was a success at one company, send him over to another company in the same business, making with the same products or the same service, and they can fail there. And it happens more often than you might think. Why is it? Because although the companies are in the same industry or the same business, they do things different. Their culture is different. Their processes are different. They may have a different definition of quality. The products themselves may have different features and benefits and applications. It's not always a direct match. What you really want to look at is the ability and the skills, or as James liked to say, the talent. You're looking for talent that isn't necessarily tied to experience. I like to take my clients through a process to determine where their best people came from. So if growing your own is how you get your best people, then you need to grow your own. If there's certain complementary industries or educational institutions that yield you a good result, then you want to go and draw people from there. I had a client had an application engineering center where they took pumps and fluid handling system and applied them to specific customer applications. And we were hiring very, very good mechanical engineers, really, really good mechanical engineers. And brought them into the organization, and a lot of them did not succeed. And they didn't succeed because we didn't know. We didn't know why they didn't succeed. So we went through an evaluation of our good guys, the mechanical engineers that had stuck with us, that had been in the organization, and were really satisfying our customers' requirements. And we found out they had an interesting background. They came from average engineering schools with average grades. So they tended to grow up in rural areas or country areas, on farms and places where a lot of resources were not available. And what we found is that these guys who grew up on farms were accustomed to having to solve problems without a lot of help, and they were able to find simple solutions with the tools and products at hand. When we were bringing in these more sophisticated mechanical engineers that, you know, or that came from a different kind of background, they were giving the customers perhaps more sophisticated solutions, but they took longer, were more expensive, priced them out of their opportunity. So we changed our profile. We changed the places where we recruited from, and we absolutely looked for people with an agricultural or farm background. So what you want to do is know what background and what fits the people that you're bringing in, and you want to make sure that that profile is front and center in your hiring process for those positions. And absolutely the best way is look at the team you've got, look at where they came from, and you try to get the same kind of people, the same basic backgrounds. Most companies hire like this. They run an ad, they collect a bunch of resumes, they do interviews, they check references, and they hire somebody. As my clients know, I'm a fanatic just up front of who's doing the interviewing, and if only one person's interviewing, I'll wade in and do interviews as well, because you have to have multiple opinions. But this is the straightforward, conventional, I don't want to say old-fashioned, but it's the way we've hired for a long time. There's flaws with that, and James will tell you the first one is if you run an ad, you're only looking at people that are looking for a job. That doesn't help you a heck of a lot. Resumes, I think the expression we use, there's some really good fiction writers out there. You can pay people to write your resume, so you're not necessarily going to get the best information. But the process that we consider the best hiring process is actually upside down. First is testing. If you can profile a person and understand their abilities, and with a test that shows that, test them first. Test them before you even look at their resume is really the philosophy you should go with. But figure out what the right tests are, and I'll talk about each of these in a minute. But figure out what the right tests are and test them up front. You checking references? Yeah, I love checking references, but why don't you start with the references they don't give you? Okay? Talk to other people that know this person and get references from them. If you're going to do an interview, do a behavioral interview, and I'll get into what goes into a behavioral interview in a minute. And, then you can check the references they gave you. But let's be honest. Are they going to give you a reference that isn't going to say something good? Then the resume, and then you can hire them. And that's the process that, on paper, in theory, was great. But the reality is, tests cost money. You're going to only test the candidates that you think are good enough, that meet a certain screen. And you got to screen them somehow. So you're going to start with the resume anyhow, and you're going to do an interview anyhow. But the best of tools that you can have in your toolbox for this are references they don't give you, a good behavioral interview, and testing. Make sense? Let's talk about it in a little more detail. Testing generally covers 5 categories. Okay, you can get a cognitive ability test, which is aptitude, personality and behavior. You can test integrity, job knowledge, physical ability. The cognitive tests or aptitude tests are sometimes combined with personality and behavior, and they often call these things assessments. The most popular ones are the DISCs and MBTIs, the DISC and Myers-Briggs test, but there's others, Caliper, Burke, Activity Vector Analysis. Tests can cost you anywhere from $59 for a DISC test, $4,000 I've spent once trying when I was hiring a CFO. But they're all still testing, and what you're looking for is that type of person that has the characteristics, the thinking, the behaviors, all those things that fit your job skills, what you're looking for in your person. It's their, the cognitive is their ability to do the job. Reasoning, perceptive, memory, those are the kinds of things. You can use mechanical aptitude, clerical aptitude, spatial aptitude. There are all kinds of cognitive tests. It's about what applies. If you're hiring mechanics, you obviously want the mechanical aptitude. If you're hiring clerical people, you want that. But there are any number of cognitive tests, and they can be customized to meet your requirements. Personality and behavior tests, those are about chemistry. Are they going to fit in? How well they work with others. That's the one you really want to be using if they're going to be outward-facing, dealing with customers, dealing with people. But also, if you're going to have a supervisor, you really want to know, are they going to be an extrovert or an introvert? Are they going to be good at talking to people and working with people or not? And although people can often buck up and get through an interview and come across pretty good, what I have found about these tests is that they get to the true individual. And more often than not, I have found people that their true self comes through in the test, and when I've talked to them afterwards, they actually would acknowledge, yes, this is a problem I have, and they would tell me the things they do to overcome them. So I'm not saying take the test as absolutely you don't score well enough to talk to me at all on certain characteristics. It doesn't hurt to talk to him and compare the test results to your observations. Sometimes you get a surprise. There's a category called integrity tests, and I know they're out there, and I still struggle with how good they are, quite frankly, because I think if somebody wants to really lie, they can often beat the test. However, if you want to understand integrity, you do a deep dive in interviewing. Very direct questions about previous experience that might relate to ethics and integrity, and you don't just ask one question about it. You drill down about 5 to 6 layers and see if there's any cracks. And I say this from my own experience. We were hiring a CFO, and we took this person through 5 or 6 different interviews with very, very good interviewers, and it wasn't until the 6th interview that, which was actually an industrial psychologist, that he drilled down deep enough that we found out the guy had committed insurance fraud. And he did nothing about it. He was ordered by his boss to do it, and he did it. And he didn't tell the board of directors or anything. And we ended up just striking him from our list. We had already invested a lot of time and money into hiring this guy, but it took a lot of work to get to one integrity issue that just was a huge red flag, that you just didn't want this guy as a CFO. So integrity tests are good. Just remember that if you really, really want to study integrity, direct questioning is probably going to get you even a lot further. There's job knowledge or skills tests. These are, keyboarding, accounting, programming, blueprint reading, those kind of tests. Physical ability tests, you probably have to do them in your own operation. You just need to develop a test that has whatever physical abilities you need from the individual, and you can observe. So I talk about references from people that they didn't give you. I really am a big fan of this. Your employees usually know somebody that you're interviewing. If you have a big enough organization, you'll find people that either worked with them or know somebody who worked with them and can express an opinion. Always good to get some information from others that don't know them. Now, this can go both ways. I have a client who recently hired a new operations manager. And in the process of looking at his resume and getting some background information, she noticed that he worked at the same place as another client of mine who she knew from our peer advisory board. She picked up the phone, she called him and said, "Do you know so-and-so?" And this is really interesting because the references were glowing. They said, the other client said, "I trained this person, I know this person, I worked with them for many years, you'll never find a better employee." So sometimes you get that when you go out and talk to people for reference. They didn't give you, this guy never even thought of giving the other client as a reference to him, didn't know the two companies were in any way connected at all. So you can have a positive result, but you also can get the negative results. You can also find out from your employees that they don't like this guy, that's a problem where he was working before, or that there's issues with him. But you can also go with the references that they give you, and you're probably not going to be able to avoid those. But let's be honest. If you're hiring somebody, are they going to give you somebody who's going to say something bad about them? They're not. They're going to give you references of people that are going to say something good. Well, the good news on that also is people don't want to lie, so they're not going to make stuff up or misrepresent the person. They're just going to try to avoid saying something about it. So what you want to do then is ask good questions. Again, drill down and ask a lot of questions, and you end up listening for what they don't say more so than what they do say. You know, it's challenging, but it's basically reading between the lines. But realistically, everybody grades on a curve. If you're going to ask somebody about a reference on somebody, ask them rated on a 1 to 10 scale. Ask a number of characteristics and qualities on a 1 to 10 scale, and you'll find out the person never goes beyond 8 and never goes below 3. And so you have to put it in perspective. All right. But that way, at least you get an understanding of how this person observes the candidate, as opposed to, you know, sending out a survey, everybody on 1 to 10, and there's one guy that gives all 10s and another person that only gives 6s, because they never give more than 6. So be careful with that, but understanding their curve and their scale is really quite important. Be careful with resumes. Look for gaps and generalities. Absolutely generalities. You want specifics. And oh, by the way, just because they have a 12-week gap doesn't mean they were in the mental hospital or rehab either. And even the best fiction writer can't create a story that doesn't work at all. Okay, you can't just create something from nothing. But you're going to look at the resume, look at it for specifics, look at it for gaps, look at it for issues. I'm a big fan of database, of resumes that have data in it. You find way too often people will give you generalities, and we'll talk about this in a minute in behavioral interviews, when we talk about behavioral interviews, but generalities usually means they were there when it happened, they might have been on the periphery of it, but they didn't necessarily do it. I don't know how many times I've seen a resume of somebody who said they were a salesperson, but in fact they were in the customer service area or inside sales, but they knew just enough to talk about it like they knew something. I'm a huge fan of behavioral interviews. If we didn't do a behavioral interview on that CFO, we'd have never found out that he had some integrity issues. So when you're interviewing somebody, don't just walk through the resume. Okay, I often do 2 interviews with the candidate. I'll do a walk through the resume, and then I'll come back and I'll do a behavioral interview. But if you just walk through the resume, then they're controlling the interview, not you, and all you're doing is asking questions about stuff that they wrote about. In a behavioral interview, you ask some questions that are very detailed, that make them stop and think, and you very quickly get ability to understand. You very quickly are understanding their ability to think. Literally, a person can take a minute, 30 seconds to a minute of dead silence to formulate the answer to a well-phrased behavioral interview question. It's okay. You know, it's not a selling situation. The first one to speak doesn't lose. But it's okay if they take time to formulate the proper answer. Okay, and answers can take as much as 5 minutes. I mean, they're detailed. But you'll find out quickly whether they really did something or not. You'll find out if a good behavioral question is about what they did, why they did it, their reasoning for doing it, their tactics for doing it, and their results. I have a question on the screen, tell me about when you disagreed about your supervisor. What was the issue? What did you do about it? How did you resolve it? And what was the result? And they should be able to knock off every one of the questions in the question and give you a good answer. And you may find out things like, well, I had an issue with him, but I never talked to him about it. Is that the kind of person you want? Is that the kind of thinking and behavior you want in your organization? And what was the result? You'll find out whether this person's a results-oriented individual or not. And using questions like that is absolutely the most effective way to handle an interview. You're going to learn more and more about the person than maybe than you ever wanted to know, but you're going to learn a lot about them. Now, you can get lists of behavioral interview questions on the internet. Google's, if you go to Google and hit behavioral interview, you'll find all kinds of options, and you will see where they're telling people how to answer standard behavioral interview questions, because there's a lot more candidates out there than hiring people. But you can get a list of questions there and work with them. It's pretty hard to be prepared to answer a lot of behavioral questions. They can't just come in and if they come in and just rattle off an answer, then that's probably not a very good. They're probably a really good interviewer, but may not be the best employee. So that's what you want to do with a behavioral interview. So you just need to be smart about hiring in today's environment. There's good employee turnover and there's bad employee turnover, and just remember, bad folks will drive your good folks away. Experience isn't always what you think. You want to hire talent and ability. Okay, and if you're hiring experience, you may often be hiring your competitors' rejects. Think about it. Why did they leave? Why did your competitor let them leave? And don't forget your true costs. Absolutely, don't forget your true costs. It may be cheaper to spend real cash to hire faster and better, and there could be a very, very big opportunity cost to trying to doing it yourself. The most important point is, what's your hiring process? Document your hiring process. You want a profile of what a good candidate is, and not just education and, what do you say? You want them to have a bachelor's degree in accounting and 3 to 5 years experience and they can be my accountant. There's so much more in the background on that individual that you need to consider. If the best people for the job come from certain areas, certain schools, have certain kinds of experience, put that in your profile and stick with it. You just want to stick with it. I have a client that did rebuilt auto parts, and he had a process that he used. He got really hung up. He had a very hard time hiring people with the mechanical and the mathematical skills that he needed, and so he eventually landed on a test, and he found out that the people that worked out best in his role were scoring 34 on the test. And he kept hiring people who scored 34. In fact, they developed a model, 34 or out the door. So 34 is the number at the score they wanted. And every once in a while, he'd get somebody who scored 33 or 32 and deviated from him, but he liked him in the interview. And he said, this is going to be a good guy. And every time he got the person to score 32 or 33, they didn't work out. So once you get your profile down of whatever it is that are the primary measures for your people, stick with it, don't deviate from it. And I think that's probably the most important lesson that you can learn is have a process, follow your process, follow it consistently, and don't give it up. But don't forget the time value of money. It's more and more important. So I hope I gave you a couple of good ideas. That was my goal here today. I hope you're thinking you can leave here thinking a little more strategically about your hiring process and recognize some things you need to change. Do we have any questions, James?
Don't have any questions just yet. I am going to send out another poll.
Okay.
And folks can take a look at this now. Does your company have a clearly defined strategy? And guys, a good chance. Give some feedback on that. And also, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate and put those into the box. We'll get those answered to Jeff and get them answered for you. Coming back, let's see. We have it's coming back. 25% of our respondents are saying that their company does not have a clearly defined strategy for attracting talent, and 75% are coming back and saying that yes, but it's a bit haphazard.
Yeah, well, there's two ways to have processes in your business, and one is the one in your head, which is all really nice, and we like to follow that. It's the one that you wrote down is the one that you're going to follow best, and that you can hand off to somebody else and say, here's our process, get started on it. I don't think anybody in this call needs to be the one who is actually collecting the resumes and running the ads. You're going to have somebody else in your organization take care of that. So what you really need to do is have people on your team that can help you with the process to get good people in. But if it's not written down, it's pretty hard for them to help you.
Mm.
Yeah, the administrative assistant that can read your mind so well, I think those are a thing of the past. Although some of us may still have one, I don't know.
Indeed, indeed. And also, folks, make sure you check out there. This presentation is listed as one of the handouts, so feel free to take on that. Have a couple. Anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask now? Don't be afraid. You got the question box. Type those in, and I'll ask those to Jeff. Also, Jeff, is there any other slides that has any of your contact information? You'd be willing to talk with any people offline that aren't able to?
There we go. Contact information on both of us, James.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And luckily, folks, this is also in the materials as well in the handout.
Yeah.
But if there are no further or no questions, then we will wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy day to sit with us here. We had everybody stayed to the end, so that's actually that's a good positive. You will be getting a little survey after this as well, so please answer that and get that information back here. And if you guys have any other questions or want to reach out to either Jeff or myself, there's our information there. Don't hesitate to reach out. And want to thank you again for taking the time. And
yeah.
Jeff, do you have anything else you want to finish with?
Yeah, just thank you, everybody, and love to catch up with you if you want to drop me a note or give me a call. I'm available to work with people as required. Primarily, I think if some of you may already be on my peer advisory boards, I think there's at least one person on the board that's actually sitting in on this presentation. But if you'd like to talk further about that, these are some of the lessons we learn in our peer advisory boards, and we do a lot more than just hiring and firing. We get into all facets of the business, and the peer advisory board brings business owners together to advise each other like an informal board of directors or board of advisors. So if you'd like to consider that, I'd love to talk to you. And thank you very much. I hope I delivered you a couple good ideas, got you to think a little differently about your hiring process, and was at least a little bit of help today.
Excellent, excellent. Once again, folks, thank you very much. We will be getting a copy of this presentation in your email in the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that, and give us some feedback on anything that you would like to hear or see in the future. And with that, we are done. Have a great week.
Thank you.